It is fantastic to have you joining us. I notice people are coming into the meeting now, and we're going to give people just a few more minutes as they arrive. But to all of our friends, family, and supporters, it's just terrific to have you rolling in, isn't it, Graham?
It is, Martin, and I was just reflecting a few minutes ago. It is actually less than a year since you and I sat down and decided that this would be a good idea to tackle. So it's one of those, isn't amazing? The day's actually arrived.
Yeah, it is really, really wonderful. And I notice we've got people streaming in now, Graham. So again, welcome to everybody that's just coming into the webinar now. We're going to give people a couple more minutes to roll in. But again, thank you to everybody for being here. A couple of reminders for you. Feel free in the chat to introduce yourselves, maybe talk about the connection you have with Graham and I, or with the book. You'll also notice at the bottom of your screen, you've got a Q&A button there, and that's where Graham and I are going to get to as many questions as we can as we move through the webinar. So if you've got a question, something you want to ask us, feel free to put it in the Q&A, and we'll go take a look at that. We've also got some folks helping us out, that if you've got any technical questions about where to get access to the book, etc., they'll be able to answer those for you in the chat along the way. So again, welcome to those that are still streaming in. We're so very happy to have you with us. And Graham and I look forward to sort of showcasing what this book is all about at long last. And as you said, Graham, as people are rolling in, less than a year ago since we got started on this.
It is, and thank you to a few of you who are just making 100% sure you're here by texting me as well. So I'll try not to multitask too much and do that. But we really appreciate, I mean, so many of you have got so many commitments on during the day. So we just really love the fact that you've been able to take the time to do this and celebrate today with us. It's hopefully a nice chance to chat with colleagues and friends, and a nice chance to give you a little bit of a heads up on what's in the book as well, which we're really excited about. I think Martin, that's fair to say it's exceeded our expectations of what we were hoping for, and that's not always the case, I must say, from having done a little bit of this before.
No, without doubt, it's just been terrific, and the response that we've had in the early days, Graham, as people have reviewed the book for us, or our amazing co-contributors that we'll thank properly in a moment, just their feedback, if they've got early access to the book, etc., it really has just exceeded all of my expectations. What's also really fun for me, Graham, as I'm watching people come into the session, I'm spotting colleagues that I haven't seen in a very long time, as far away as South Africa and Germany and the United States and the UK. So thank you to all of my friends and past colleagues who have decided to join us here today. It's really, really appreciated. And we're probably at that time now, Graham, if you're okay, well, we might launch in. Are you ready to go?
I think as ready as I'm going to be, and you're a lot more used to doing these big group things, Martin. So you launch off, and then I'll follow on.
Very good. Well, it goes without saying that the very first thing we want to do is to just give a very, very big thank you to our friends, our family, our supporters, all of our teams along the way in our career, who you've made your way into this book and helping enrich us as leaders. And a very special call out and thank you to those closest to us, our family, our friends, our supporters that we acknowledge in the book. Just a really special call out to all of you. And I know Graham wants to give his thanks as well.
Yeah, look, thank you. I think to my family and to the team around us as well. I think it's not easy doing something like this, and there are always sacrifices, the amount of time that goes into putting a book together. So yeah, big thank you.
Yeah. So I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet and pay our respects to their elders past and present. We extend that respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples joining us today. And the sort of backstory to this book was really veteran CEO and Vice Chancellor, that's me, sort of colliding with, sort of a world-class and world-famous performance psychologist in Graham, who both were staring at probably one of the greatest challenges of our career, and that was to help me and my team at RMIT University save the university for all intensive purposes, as we had to navigate the choppy waters for that COVID period. And a number of my VCE colleagues are on the webinar today. And can I just say a call out and thank them? But it's also about an amazing group of advantage leaders, 15 of them, drawn from all sorts of different sectors and industries and backgrounds, who we interviewed as part of putting this book together. And their wisdom, their contributions, really combined with Graham's and mine, have allowed us to create the book. So to all of our co-contributors, nearly all of whom are going to be joining us here today, I invite you in the chat box to introduce yourself and share your thoughts along the way. But again, thank you for being with us on this journey. We couldn't have done it without you. We thought it would be a good idea to kick off our webinar today with a video that we've put together that we think sums up pretty well what this book is all about.
Oh, Martin, did you ever imagine that you might be almost featuring in a movie trailer?
No, I did not, Graham. So it was fun to put that together.
It was, and look, at this point, I might just say a big shout out and a thank you to Justina Coe from eBlossomly. Justina had never put a book trailer together, but we went looking for somebody that we thought could partner with us in a really creative way, and to do it in the same spirit of creative partnering and iterative learning as we wanted to do with Toolkit for Turbulence. And Justina, thank you so much. I think we both learned how to balance that. Interestingly, we've never physically met, but we've managed to create, I think, what's a fabulous product. And I can certainly say if anybody's looking for a creative partner to do something like that, yeah, let us know. We'll put you in touch with Justina. Okay, so where do we start with this? We started with the reality that business leaders are facing once-in-generation challenges, and we called that turbulence. And when we looked at the sort of nature of the turbulence, we were able to see that it was different for different types of industries and different types of groups. So let's have a look at the different types of turbulence that people are experiencing across the various industries and sectors that we faced. So let's have a look at them for a moment. If I think about turbulence from the pandemic perspective, because we all experience that. But when you read Toolkit for Turbulence, you're going to hear some fabulous stories. You're going to hear Anna Wengren, one of my favorite people and culture leaders. Hi, Anna in Sydney. Anna works for Safety Culture, one of Australia's leading tech companies. And she talked about, yeah, pandemic, we just folded up our laptops and went home and kept working. There were personal challenges, but she said the big turbulence for us was the tech crunch, and we had to pivot our business. And then you think about someone like Paul Ostrowski. Paul has been for a decade the CEO of Care Connect, one of Australia's leading aged care providers. And Paul, I know you're there, and is there anything on this list that your team didn't experience? And with such a vulnerable population as well. And then Robert Iavasi. Robert was running Asahi. And I remember him saying to us in the interviews, I didn't even know what was going to be in our containers when they arrived. And yet he's trying to run a business with hybrid working and working across so many different sectors. And then, of course, Martin, I remember the day when you said to me, I've got over 10,000 students. Sorry, 10,000 people. I've got 80,000 students. And boy, I've been through a lot of change in my past, but this is different. So can we just take a couple of moments, Martin, for you to think about, from representing the leaders here, what's it like on the inside when that turbulence is coming from the outside?
Yeah, it's a great question, Graham. Thank you. And, I've got the great pleasure now of being a group mentor for an organization called Mentor List, where I work with chief executives and CXOs all across Australia. And the words on this slide, Graham, because I actually asked them this question in every session, are pretty indicative of the way that they are feeling right now. And yet they know that something's got to give. They know that their 2019 playbook isn't going to cut it. They know the dust isn't going to settle. They know that they've got to be able to get their teams out of reactive mode into responding mode, and to help them sort of get out of that sort of defensive mindset and help them pivot much more to an adaptive mindset to sort of lead the organization while they're reacting to all that's going on into the next horizons to be successful. So I think these words sum it up, Graham, but I'm also really struck as I work with them just how incredibly motivated they are to want to adapt themselves to be the best leader they can for their people, and to do the right thing by the organization. And certainly when I was in the midst of it at RMIT with my colleagues, it was that notion of being the custodians of the organization and wanting to get our way through the adversity and turn it to advantage that was the driving force that sat behind us.
So Martin, isn't it amazing when you now look back what has shifted over this last 3 years? I jotted 3 or 4 things down in preparation for today. 3 years ago, pandemics was something that we heard they happen, but well, will it ever really disrupt us now in such a modern world? Inflation and interest rates hadn't moved for a long period of time. Supply chains seemed to be pretty predictable. AI was something that we saw in the movies, and had no idea what hybrid working meant. So I think what all of those have meant for leaders as we've talked with them and worked with them is that they're now operating in a different environment. They're operating in a far more turbulent environment. And it's more complex, as Paul Ostrowski has just jotted down, I noticed in the chat, that it's so much more complex and the adrenaline is firing for people. So I think what that meant for us was probably 2 or 3 things. I think one was that the traditional approaches to change management are a little too linear. And I think second, also, we need to recognize that leaders need to approach this differently. And that's why we went out to these leaders that we ultimately called advantage leaders, because we felt that they were people who weren't just weathering the storm, they were doing something more constructive and more creative with it. And Martin, let's share a little then around what the pathway is that we saw those leaders taking.
Thank you, Graham. I got a little excited there. I almost jumped prematurely to our pathway. But the backbone of the book, where Graham and I really started when we sat together over a meal to think about the book, was this pathway of advantage leaders. And it starts with disruption, and that's using disruption as a force multiplier to achieve what's impossible in stable times. And as I work with leaders, they often smile when they think about, disruption can unlock doing things that would have seemed impossible in more stable times. But then it's about moving to adaptation. It's about recalibrating your personal and team mindset to embrace new tools and adaptive capabilities. And the book is just full of those tools and pieces of advice to do just that. But true advantage leaders then don't just adapt, they turn it to their advantage. They apply those adaptive capabilities to emerge stronger from new types of disruption. And I think it's summed up really well by our colleague and co-contributor, Andrew McConville, the chief executive of the Murray-Darling Basin Authority, when he said in the book, rather than trying to remove turbulence altogether, you've got to equip your people with the mental and emotional tools to navigate it successfully.
So Martin, when we started the process, I know you will recall that we said we don't want a playbook. We want something, and we didn't actually call it. And we had this very funny email backwards and forwards with each other about 3 months after we started writing, saying, "Is it called the Toolkit or is it called a toolbox?" Which was quite funny because we then bet back said, well, we better see what Wileys have been promised, and that's probably what we better deliver. And it became a toolkit. But seriously, we felt that it needed to pass these 3 tests. It needed to be proven, it needed to be practical, it needed to be easy to implement. But we also wanted a graphic real-life example. Let me read to you where some of that graphic real-life example came from. And can I welcome Captain Kevin Sullivan? And Kevin, I'm just going to read something from the book. On a calm, clear day in 2009, just off the sparsely populated northwest coast of Australia, the fate of 315 passengers and crew on QF72 from Singapore to Perth lay in the hands of Captain Kevin Sullivan, a highly experienced pilot who had flown fighter jets in the US Navy and the Royal Australian Air Force. Cruising uneventfully at 11,000 metres, the onboard computers broadcast a series of confusing and contradictory signals before pitching the plane into 2 violent and unexpected dives towards the Indian Ocean below, wrenching the pilots physically upwards from their seats and sending passengers and galley equipment crashing into the ceiling and back again. Over 100 people were injured, many seriously with fractures, lacerations, and spinal injuries, as the pilots fought for the control of the Qantas A330-300, which according to flight computers was simultaneously stalling and overspeeding. The automatic systems designed to make the plane safe had malfunctioned in a way the pilots had not been trained to respond to. The pilots had only seconds to find an alternative to the pre-programmed playbook that was propelling them towards the Earth. The 300 people, 15 people on that plane owe their life to Captain Sullivan's decisions and skills in taking back control of the plane, issuing mayday calls, and then he made the decision to land at remote Learmouth Airport base, thousands of miles from anywhere, because he couldn't trust the plane. When I asked Kevin what he did, he simply said, "I had my toolkit." And Kevin, thank you for your contribution to the book, let alone that story and everything that goes behind it. But Kevin essentially said to me, "Graham, it's about aviate, it's navigate, it's communicate. That's what you do. That's what you're trained to do. You're a Navy pilot. You aviate by keeping the plane in the air. You navigate to land it safely. You communicate to get the resources you need." That was where we started. And I think in many ways, we're really inspired to think, okay, so how do we help business leaders who are not facing such life-threatening challenges, but how do we give them the deep practical tools that they can use when they're facing their biggest challenges? So let's walk you through now what the steps are in the book, because in many ways, this is what Kevin did. He recalibrated his mindset, he engaged his team, and he was the coach that his people needed. And the story of him walking down the plane is just amazing, and I'll leave you to read that. But there are so many other stories of our advantage leaders as well. So let me unpack the recalibrate your mindset. And then Martin will take you through the piece on engaging the team. And here I'd like to pay a tribute to Professor Tanya Munro. Tanya's on the call today. I've noticed your comment in the chat that's totally focused on this. Tanya is a world-class physicist. She's also the chief defense scientist. She runs the Defense Science Technology Organization of over 2,000 people. And I've had the pleasure of working with Tanya and her leaders for a number of years now. And when we spoke to Tanya and we said, "You've got many of the smartest people in the country. You're dealing with some of the most complex issues of AUKUS and the geopolitical challenges and so on. So what is it that's the key to success?" Tanya didn't hesitate. She didn't suggest that it was anything to do with the technical skills. What she said was, it's actually about being able to get your mindset into that adaptive mindset. So that's what you're going to find in the book. You're going to find a series of specific elements. So each of the bullet points here cover a specific chapter. So let me just take you through them quite quickly. Paradigm shifts. In here, you're going to hear things like Paul Ostrowski. talking about how if you're in aged care, sure, you can react to the paradigms, but you've got to start to shape them as well, or they're going to overrun you. The second one is it starts with you. Martin's going to tell some of his personal story, values that he learned as a young boy growing up with some of the physical challenges he's experienced, and how that shaped his personal values of courage and care and mateship. And I heard Martin have so many conversations through COVID saying we've got to make these desperately difficult decisions. But how do we do it with courage and care? Let go and accept the externality of change. Wow, isn't that a big one? Chris Tanti, you're the CEO of the Leukemia Foundation. I love your quote in the book. It says, it's not going to be linear. Don't beat yourself up. The world is changing so much. We can't try and control it all. Dial up the learning. Paul Doldig, you and I have worked together at Uni of Adelaide, Uni of Melbourne, Australian National. But my favourite story is when you said 2 months out from COVID, the IT team came to you and said, we're just putting in Office 365. We're about to roll out. We've got this thing called Teams. It's got a license. We're not sure what it is. We think it lets people talk to each other across the university. We think it'll take about 3 years to get it to work across the uni. It's as complex as ANU. 2 months later, everybody at ANU was using Teams. You can dial up the learning. That's what we've focused on there. And then the final one is prioritizing self-care. Because Martin, I think you and I both know that we're now going to move on to have a look at engaging teams, and you cannot engage your team. You cannot be the coach that you want your people to be if you're not addressing that this is a fatiguing, challenging, dynamic environment. You've got to look after yourself and prioritize yourself and nurture yourself in order to have the energy to be able to then do that with your team. So Martin, let's have a look at engaging teams, and I think some fabulous examples here.
Yeah, thank you, Graham, and thanks for that wonderful summary and call out to our co-contributors. And let me talk about another friend and co-contributor, Andrew Westacott, who's with us today. You know, Andrew was the chief executive of the Australian Grand Prix Corporation, and in many ways was at ground zero for the awakening of Australia to what the ultimate consequences were going to be of the pandemic. Many of us will remember that day, the day the race was cancelled, the day the Premier made the announcements around what the protocols were going to be for Victoria. But as Andrew approached that, as you can all imagine, he had the problem of his team never knowing when they would race again, both for the Grand Prix as well as the MotoGP. And he sort of fully embraced the notion that he needed to rescaffold his team to stay focused and engaged as they battled through that adversity. And Andrew and the team came up with this notion of ready to race. You know, they couldn't control the external world. They largely couldn't control when they would be asked to run the race again. But they made a promise to each other that when that call came, when it was possible for the races to begin, they would not only be ready, they'd be better than where they were before. And this quote from Andrew, I think, sums it up really well. And Andrew, to you, thank you for your support and wisdom. We created Ready to Race with over half a dozen teams championing work streams, and it gave us that sense of shared purpose and involvement across the organization, which is essential to work as one team. And boy, is it ever. And sort of at the heart of the book, we introduced this notion of a blueprint for teamwork. It follows 3 core areas of what we call the ACL, which is all about how do you get your team to align? How do you get them to collaborate effectively? And how do you learn all the time so that you're acting and responding at no matter what comes your way? So in the first area, and there's 6 elements or building blocks to the team. The first is all about having that shared direction and focus. And that's exactly what Ready to Race was about, keeping everybody with a clear direction and very focused on what they needed to do. The second is all about the interpersonal relationships that go on between teams. It's about how can you get your team not just coming together and aligning, but how do you really drive commitment? How do you really drive performance partnering? How do you create the psychologically safe environment for the things that need to be spoken to be spoken. And the reason we do all of that is because of synergy and synergistic decision making. It's about how can the team always outperform the sum of its parts, because they really have figured out how to align and how to collaborate. But that's not where it needs to stop. It then needs to move to learn, about making team learning a habit. It's about reaching to the edges of your organization, to your customers, your stakeholders, and your communities, and making sure that you've got the timely information in the room to respond at pace in the face of turbulence. And we talk a lot in the book about deconstructing the tempo of your organization or the rhythm of your organization and reconstructing it so that it's fit for purpose for the pace of change and the relentless turbulence that you and your team are going to face. The third element of the book is all about being the coach your people need. And I'm just so happy to see Kate here today. Kate was my CFO when I was Vice Chancellor at RMIT University. And along with the rest of my executive, we locked step to get the university through it. But like me and others, Kate discovered some new superpowers during the pandemic in the way that she coached her people through and her colleagues actually through the year. And I think her quote sums it up really well. My core job is to be available to support my team. By empowering and supporting my team, they are more motivated to get things done, and we get a better outcome. And so in the book, we talk about it's no longer about being the boss, the leader, the manager. It's about us embracing the notion that we need to pivot to be the coach that our people need. And it is about putting our people first. I was talking to a group of chief executives yesterday, and I looked at them and I said, is there anybody here that believes they can be successful without their team being successful? And they all, of course, chuckled and said, absolutely no way. And yet we often don't take the time every day, every week, every month to really look at where are our people at and put them first before we get to any of the transactional or other work, and make sure that they have the right mindset and support to be the best that they can be. As Kate discovered and I discovered, and actually, Graham, it was an unprompted common theme across nearly all of our 15 contributors, was this notion of we all discovered during the pandemic that being more authentic, being more vulnerable, being more values driven, and sharing those values with your team, that's a superpower. And as I talk to leaders now and I help them to do what Graham did for me, which is to share those deeply held values that drive them to succeed, it really is quite amazing to see what happens in the team when you do that. And finally, it's about reimagining the performance conversation. There's very little correlation between traditional performance conversations and adaptive and successful thinking in the minds of executives. So in the book, we introduce a new model for you to follow in the way that you have performance conversations with your team that we know from experience fundamentally changes the quality of those relationships and the quality of their performance.
Martin, thanks so much for that. A couple of extra little shout outs from my perspective, particularly around the coaching. We really did set out to find people in the corporate area who could bring some unique experiences and on the ground experience. We also set out to find people like Kevin Sullivan and also Ashley Ross. And Ashley Ross has been a colleague of mine for 30 years, I think, Ashley. And you'll actually find the section on coaching begins with a sort of funny but quite insightful story when Alex was the head coach of the International Cricket Academy. And a story that I encourage you to read, where he hands out medicine balls and video cameras to all of the coaches and asks them to coach people in how to crush cups using medicine balls across an oval in Dubai. It is a very funny exercise, but it highlights that the role of the coach is to create the environment in which people are successful, not to teach them how to do the tasks. That's what they already know how to do. So Ashley, thank you for your contribution. You've really added some remarkable points there. And I think where you've talked about that sort of coaching, building trust. So as we head towards wrap and questions, The book is divided into 6 sections, and those 6 sections we've talked about as we've worked our way through. So you can see how we've stepped through pathway into mindset, set up your team, be the coach your people need, and scale is really taking it to yourself, your individuals, and your organizations. And as we said right at the start, we just make sure it's super practical. So there are 25 tools, there are lots of canvases, and this is the point at which I would like to particularly thank Wiley, our publisher. We gave him a very tough gig to pull this together, and Chris Shorten from Wiley did an amazing job going backwards and forwards. I remember when we did the edit, I've done a few of these books, and I said to Martin, normally at about this stage, there'd be about 6 to 8, maybe 10 corrections. I've just sent back 180. And they were purely because we were trying to get canvases and everything lined up. So I think you'll find it is dense, but it's also super practical. So how does it make a difference? What we desperately hope is that for leaders, this is your toolkit for turbulence, but it's not the only toolkit. We want you to build your own, because I do still see leaders who are struggling and are overwhelmed. And Tanya, I noticed you just posted a couple of moments ago saying the turbulence is going to keep coming at it. We know that human beings are designed to overreact. We all do it. We all get defensive and protective, exactly like I do when I'm about to present something like this. The challenge is to hold your tension long enough to be able to play to your superpower. And that, to me, is getting the mindset in place that's creating the workplace environments. And I think we just need to reshape some of those. And I think particularly one point that Martin raised a moment ago is we absolutely need to challenge the tempo that's operating inside organizations, because you look at the world-class outfits that operate high-performing networks of teams, their battle rhythm or their tempo is what actually drives them to success. So I hope that's one thing that you really do take out of that. So Martin, I think that that really does bring us through to some questions, and hopefully we're on time.
It sure does. So it is over to you now, folks. I've got one question, Graham, in the Q&A. I'll just read that. Congratulations on the launch. This is from Anita. Congratulations on the launch of the book, which addresses so many challenges faced by all of us. Could you comment on the university sector from an academic perspective? The education sector has been highly corporatized. What mindset tools can we use to shift our view to see this as an advantage rather than a hindrance? And I think it's a terrific question, Anita. There certainly has been a lot of dialogue around that. And I think that what the book will help all leaders do is to adapt in the environment in which they operate. So going back to the values that occurred to me, Anita, when we were going through the challenges at RMIT, by foregrounding care in the way that we went about making those really tough decisions that we had to make, it really gave us a decision-making framework that care needed to come first for the individual, for the people that we had to take care of, even if we were facing unbelievable, difficult decisions. And I think that value, amongst many others, served us well. So I think the book will allow leaders in an academic community to take the tools and apply them in context. So thank you again, Anita, for the question. Graham, I'm looking at another question here, which is, what was the hardest part, my apologies, of the book to write? I'll let you take that one.
Yeah, I think, Martin, the thing that I rewrote the most, and you and I went backwards and forwards on the most, was the chapter on defensive mindset. And that was because what we were, I think, recognizing was that no matter what we do, and I take Anita's point a moment ago, no matter what we do, the question is, how do we find the opportunity within the challenge that we're being confronted? And it's so easy to not see the opportunity, but to protect or to defend or feel that we're helpless. So I think it was that chapter. It's the one I think I'm most proud of, maybe from a psychologist's perspective, because I feel that we managed to get it into a really simple frame, a simple working model that you can kind of look at on a day-to-day basis and really just ask yourself right now, where am I between reacting and responding in a defensive, protective way to going towards opportunities? And it's a great question that you can then, I think, attach a lot of other tools and practices to. So for me, that was, I think, the answer to that one.
Oh, great stuff. There's another question we've got, which is a great one. Do you fear that institutions may slide back to familiar and old ways of doing things? And if so, how do they prevent themselves from doing that? Do you want to take a crack at that, Graham, and then I'll dive in?
I, in the politest possible way, I've had a couple of deep and meaningful conversations with 3 or 4 of my clients in the last week. The answer is discipline. It has to be discipline. Go back to what Martin talked about a few moments ago around align, collaborate, and learn. You cannot let the organization be driven by personalities, and you can't let it be just a reactive process. There needs to be a disciplined cycle of alignment, of collaboration, and of learning. What Martin did with the VCE, I believe, at RMIT was increasingly create the environment where that team could have the learn conversations. It could have the what's working, what's not working. How do we realign this? And it took them time. And Martin, I know you would admit it took you time to open up, and there was more still that we could do. But I think it's the discipline of the align, collaborate, learn. Because if you can get people to have open conversations about learning, otherwise you end up with having to use power. And I think it was Adam Kahane in a book called Tackling Tough Problems who facilitated a number of the activities around the dismantlement of apartheid in South Africa, who said, in the absence of dialogue, force will prevail. You've got to create the environment in which you can have those sensible conversations about alignment, collaboration, and learning. Unfortunately, society's not well set up for that at the moment. Leaders, you've got to create those environments, curate those environments.
Thank you, Graham. And another question's come in from Eleanor, a good friend and colleague, with a fantastic question, I think, which starts off with fabulous toolkit. Thank you, Eleanor. But how do we take these lessons not just to adults, but also to children so that they can learn these skills as quickly as possible? And I think it's a great question, Eleanor, because many of the tools and canvases in the book can absolutely be used for younger adults to apply in their own lives, in their study, and at work. And indeed for parents, I'll just pick one of them. We talk about the performance conversations. And in the book, we talk about changing the conversation to really focus around what have they achieved that they're most proud of? What have they done to develop themselves in the last 60 or 90 days that's made them more effective? What are they enjoying? What are they doing in their life and work that they really enjoy? And then what partners, what people or teams might they need to partner with to be more successful? And one of my chief executives commented yesterday, Eleanor, that they want to take that framework, that conversation framework, and actually use it as a way of having a different conversation with their kids, just as one example. I've got a question in here from Samantha. Congrats. During the pandemic, it was easy to be vulnerable because we were all dealing with the things that were new to everyone. Now that this is past, how do we continue to take that vulnerability as leaders with us? And it's a very, very, very big part of the book. So thank you for the question. And in the book around mindset, we give a number of reflection tools to help you self-diagnose, to put you in touch with what's meaningful for you and therefore meaningful for your teams and the people that you lead. I think, though, part of it is to establish rituals for the team. It's to make sure that you co-create what are those signature behaviors of ways of working with each other that you want to live every day. What is that shared direction and 4 major priorities, not of what everybody's doing with their home teams, but then when that team comes together, you're focused on and you're relentlessly debriefing to make sure that you're acting and working in ways that support your values through your behaviors and through the direction that you set. Graham, did you have anything you wanted to add to that one?
Maybe just one point, Martin. There is a model in the book with 7 signs of vulnerability. So it takes you through looking at things like admitting uncertainty, sharing stories. I was chatting to a client, a CEO, on Monday, and she just said, "Look, she actually used that framework. She said, 'Thank you for that. I had a 2-day offsite. I was about to go on the second day, spend the whole night trying to get really clear on what my 5-year direction was for our organization. And I decided that this was ridiculous because I didn't know. So she started the next day by saying, I can't give you clarity and certainty on where we're going to be in 5 years. What I can tell you is what the values are that we will have. I can tell you what the difference we're going to try and make, but I think we're going to have to navigate this together. So Martin, I think that's hopefully a really simple, practical tool that people will find. And it's on the website too, so people can see that immediately, as well as getting the book.
That's fantastic, Graham. So before we wrap up here today, we want to ask for your help. We really want to get the word out. Graham's and my motivation for putting this book together was really about wanting to have the greatest contribution to modern leadership that we possibly could. But to do that, we've got to get the word out. And on this slide, you'll see all the various things we've been working on with colleagues to make that possible, whether it's the video trailer, the podcasts and articles that we've been doing, the website that Graham just mentioned with all of the tools that we have available. But the area where we would love to get your help is in the social media content and the traditional media. So everybody attending today will receive an email from us that's sort of full of resources that you can use to get the word out. For those of you that have already got a copy of the book and haven't done so already, we encourage you to take a photo of yourself with the book and put that out in the socials, because we know that's what lights up. But spread the word, be there with us. Many of you have contributed to it, and we just want it to have the greatest impact we can.
So I'm just seeing some messages coming up, people saying they're posting already, Martin. So
that's brilliant, Graham.
Kevin, thank you for that. David, you posted a couple of months ago about creating a community of people sharing their experiences as a toolkit. That's a really interesting suggestion, and let's kind of keep that moving, because maybe a way to sort of anchor that a little is on the 21st of November. Martin and I are going to run a 90-minute workshop. You can see the detail on your screen there. We're going to dive into 3 tools, and it's for any leaders. So I don't know, Tanya, if you want to invite 2,000 people from across defence science technology, or anybody, please feel free to invite your leaders. We would like to provide people with a 90-minute opportunity to really just share some practical stuff around the pathway, around ways they can calibrate their mindset, and very much about how they can engage their team. And I hope what you've got the sense from today is that and those of you that work with me know, my favorite, one of my favorite quotes is Oliver Wendell Holmes. I seek the simplicity on the far side of complexity. And I hope that you're getting a sense here of what we've done with Toolkit for Turbulence is it's very simple and practical. You can open almost any page. You'll find a story, you'll find a tool, you'll find something you can apply in 15 or 20 minutes. So I think that'll be something that leaders will enjoy. And please feel free to get people to sign up for that. I think it's going to be a great session in, what have we got, Martin? 3 weeks? 3 weeks time. And we'll send some notice out on that tomorrow.
Graham. Yeah, in 3 weeks' time, indeed. And so just to wrap up, I can't tell you how happy I am to have the words available now on this screen. It's a proud day for Graham and I. We'd like to thank our friends and family and greatest supporters. We want to again thank our incredible co-contributors for your wisdom, your time, all that you've contributed. And of course, to everybody attending our launch webinar today. We're just so delighted to see you. And particularly to, as I mentioned earlier, some of my colleagues that I haven't seen in years from South Africa and Germany and the UK and the United States. Thank you. Thank you for being here, and thank you for supporting us. And on that note, Graham, I'll let you have the last word.
Yeah, look, thank you so much. One person I did want to thank is Kylie Smith. Thanks. You've been the glue, the absolute glue that has just kept this thing together. You've been formidable trying to manage Martin, manage Wiley's, managing co-creators, managing me. We've had God knows how many conversations about perfectionism over the time. So thank you so much for that. And Carol, I won't write another book until the next one. Thanks for your support.
Thank you, everybody. Take good care. And we hope to see you again very soon.
Thanks, folks.